Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to give it just a moment for everybody to join. All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. My name is Misty Challey, and I am the Executive Director of the Critical Labor Coalition. I'm very excited to moderate today's webinar on work permits, and first would like to introduce you to our speakers today. Amy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Grenier. I am Policy and Practice Counsel at the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is a membership organization representing close to 17,000 immigration attorneys across the country. I am also an immigration attorney, and I practiced before working in policy. And I will pass it on to Christina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Moreno. I'm Policy Counsel for the Asylum Seeker Advocacy Project, also known as ASAP. ASAP is also a membership organization. There are over 600,000 ASAP members who are seeking asylum in the United States. ASAP members are from 175 countries and live in every state in the United States, which means that no matter where you're calling in from today, you likely live near an ASAP member. And I will pass it on to Yael.
Hi, my name is Yael Shacher. I direct the Americas and Europe program at Refugees International. Refugees International is a Washington, D.C. based advocacy organization that focuses on the rights and needs of forcibly displaced people all over the world. And we have a special emphasis on ensuring that asylum seekers and refugees have access to labor markets in the countries where they seek refuge. I'll pass it back to Misty, or should I pass it to Tobin?
I guess I'll go. Hey, everyone. My name is Tobin Williamson. I'm the Senior Partnerships and Policy Manager with the Refugee Advocacy Lab housed at Refugees International. Thanks.
Thanks to everybody for participating in today's webinar, and thanks to all of you who joined us on a Friday afternoon, which in what I hope is a beautiful day outside for you. But I'm excited to have to be moderating this, and just as background, please, there will be Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom to ask any questions, and we will address them at the end. Captions are on for accessibility, and also the PowerPoint will be made available at the end of the presentation for those that registered. So thank you again for joining us. All right. So a little bit about the Critical Labor Coalition. I formed CLC about 2 years ago to find solutions, primarily legislative, to the labor shortage. Our members are comprised of trade associations as well as corporate and individual business owners. And we advocate for bipartisan policies that incentivize individuals to either enter the workforce or re-enter the workforce. We focus on specific communities of workers, be it guest workers, caregivers, retirees, second chance workers, entry-level workers, and support primarily tax and workforce incentives to address the labor shortage. So you might be hearing that, is this still a problem? Is the workforce changing, or do we still have a labor shortage? Well, the answer is yes. As you know, the pandemic closed a lot of businesses and put a lot of people out of work. But now a lot of people just simply, for a number of reasons, haven't returned to work. And so if you look at this chart, you'll see that right now, 1.68 million workers are just simply not in the workforce for one reason or another. So there are not enough workers to fill the jobs needed in the US. In fact, just today, the jobs report published their data by the Department of Labor, showing that there are currently 8.9 million open jobs right now, with only 6.5 million unemployed workers. And what that means is that if every unemployed person in the country found a job, we would still have 2.4 million open jobs, and we need people to fill them. So the Critical Labor Coalition and its members, as are listed here, are really proud to work with the organizations that are speaking today. Refugees International, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the Asylum Seekers Advocacy Project on ways to address the workforce and work permit policies that they will be discussing today. So with that, I thank you again for joining and pass it on to Amy.
Hello, everyone. So the goal of this presentation is to provide an overview of what work permits are, the process to get them, where the problems are, and what can be done to fix them. It's not legal advice. It's not training to provide legal advice, and it's not a guide to submit your own work permit application. Some other quick notes I like to sort of caveat is that immigration law can be very overwhelming and confusing, even for those who are familiar with it. So it is, if you are feeling overwhelmed, just the goal is to just sort of like let it wash over you and like have it in the back of your head for the next time something like this comes up. I promise there's not going to be a quiz at the end. So what is a work permit? It looks like this. You might have seen them before if you work with HR or if you've hired someone. It is called, you might hear me refer to it as an EAD. I have not trained that abbreviation out of myself. It stands for an employment authorization document, and it demonstrates eligibility to work in the United States. Next slide, please. How do you get a work permit? The very first thing you need to do is you need to obtain an underlying eligibility category, which we're going to go into a little bit further in a moment. And then you submit a form called the I-765. And then USCIS either approves or denies the application. And then if it's approved, they will mail the hard copy EAD to the applicant. And then the whole process of submitting the form starts again when the EAD expires. Next slide, please. So obtaining an underlying eligibility category. So before submitting a work permit application, this is very key. And depending on the individual circumstances of the applicant, it's going to be a different process for everyone. Some of the common ones that you're going to see for folks that are recent arrivals are they might have parole, they might have temporary protected status, or they might have a pending asylum application, or they will need to file for asylum, and that is the route they will be taking. Next slide, please. So parolees. So under immigration law, the Department of Homeland Security is authorized to grant parole for urgent humanitarian or significant public benefit reasons if the person merits a favorable exercise of discretion. We're seeing a lot of parole right now because it's one of the few avenues that the administration can act without Congress. And parole has been around since the Immigration and Nationality Act was first created back in 1952. And before that, we had, we were still using incarnations of it. So it's been around for a long time. One of the things that is confusing about parolees is that you really have to look at the documents that they have to know whether or not they're eligible for a work permit and for how long. The length of time for the parole that's granted can vary to usually 1 or 2 years is the length of time that we see. And that's going to vary based off of did they come in on by CBP-1 for a CBP-1 appointment, which is an app that where you schedule to present yourself at the southern border. That if they came in that way, that might be 2 years. If they came in through a program called I abbreviate to CHNV, but it's like for certain countries like Venezuela and Cuba, if they came in that way, that would also probably be for 2 years. If someone came in and they were picked up by Border Patrol and under that circumstances, they would either get one particular kind where they're not authorized to work, or they might be released with a different kind of parole that would allow them to work. It's really technical. And every single person, like you have to look at their documents and make sure that it's the right kind of parole where they'd be eligible for work authorization. All right, next slide. So temporary protected status is another avenue for protection that the administration can implement. For example, when there was a massive earthquake in Nepal a few years ago, the government issued temporary protected status for Nepalis who are already in the United States. Some of the other countries that we've had TPS for include Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Burma. Usually, when we file a temporary protected status, you file for the status at the same time that you file the 765 form that I mentioned before. So you file for it at the same time. One of the things to keep in mind for TPS is that dates are really important. Each individual country has a different set of dates that you have to look up and make sure that you fall into that date period. So you have to show, for example, that if you're Venezuelan, you'd have to show that you've been in the United States since either March 8th, 2021 or July 31st, 2023, depending on on like which version, because they reissued it, which version you're trying to qualify for. So any of the recent arrivals from Venezuela might not be out. They're probably not going to be eligible for TPS depending on when they arrived. So, next slide. And I'm going to pass this on to Christina.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm going to talk more about the process of obtaining a work permit based on a pending asylum application. So the first step in this process is to apply for asylum. It can take a long time to apply for asylum, and it could also require legal assistance. And there can also be delays on the government's end once someone has applied for asylum, because the person needs to receive proof that their asylum application is pending with the government. And so what that looks like, it's a document called a receipt notice that an applicant will get from USCIS, which is the agency that Amy mentioned. It's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and it's the agency that processes and adjudicates these forms. It's a sub-agency of the Department of Homeland Security. But that receipt notice will confirm that USCIS has received the applicant's asylum application, and the applicant can use that receipt notice when they apply for a work permit to confirm they do have a pending asylum application. There are a lot of barriers in this process, but one of the biggest barriers is that there's a law which prevents asylum seekers from quickly applying and obtaining a work permit. So the law states that someone seeking asylum must wait 180 days after applying for asylum before they can receive an initial work permit. So that's a mandatory about 6-month waiting period before someone seeking asylum can receive and obtain a work permit. And there is a regulation interpreting this law, which says that someone seeking asylum must wait 150 days after applying for asylum before they can apply for a work permit. And then it goes on to state that USCIS should process that application within 30 days. So 150 waiting period to apply plus 30 days of processing time equals 180 days waiting period to obtain an initial work permit for someone who's applying based on a pending asylum application. And unfortunately, this 180-day waiting period is statutory, which means that Congress has to change it. And my colleague Yael will talk more about some bipartisan solutions that are in Congress right now to shorten that waiting period for people seeking asylum. And thanks, we'll go to the next slide now. So after you've obtained an underlying eligibility category, like we've talked about, the next step is to apply for a work permit. So what that looks like is you submit the form I-765, as Amy mentioned, to USCIS. There is a fee to apply for a work permit. It's $470 to apply online, or $520 to apply using a paper application. However, the fee does depend on the category. So for example, there's no filing fee for an initial work permit for someone seeking asylum, but there is a fee for a work permit renewal for someone in that category. There is a fee waiver, but it can only be filed on paper. So what that means is that if you are applying for a fee waiver, you have to submit both the fee waiver application and the work permit application in paper through the mail. Even though the work permit application itself can be filed online for some categories, including for asylum seekers. You might also need to get your biometrics taken, so have your fingerprint and photograph taken. And the application is only available in English. And we'll go to the next slide. So we want to give some context and some numbers here. So you can see there's over 1 million pending work permit applications across all categories. And for people seeking asylum, it's almost 300,000 pending applications for initial and renewal work permits. And as you can see in the slide here, the majority of the pending applications for asylum seekers are actually for renewal applications. And you can see there's a big backlog there. And we'll be talking more about that and some problems with renewal delays and some solutions to renewal delays a little bit later on. Next slide, please. Okay, so after you've obtained an underlying eligibility category, you submitted the work permit application. The next step is for USCIS to process that application. And if USCIS approves it, they will send the applicant a physical work permit card like the one you saw earlier. And of course, there can be problems here too. Sometimes applicants may have moved. They might not have updated their address with USCIS. USCIS might not have processed that address change. The card could be delivered to the wrong address or not delivered at all. So there are some problems there as well. And next slide, please. And so now we come to a slide about renewing the work permit. So once you obtain that physical work permit card, as you might have seen earlier, that physical card does have an expiration date. And the work permit validity is usually tied to the underlying category. So for people seeking asylum, applicants who apply for a work permit after October 1st of last year now receive 5-year work permits. So before, people seeking asylum used to receive a work permit that was valid for 2 years, but asylum cases now take much longer to process. They can take up to 4 or 5 years for that asylum application to be adjudicated. And so rather than forcing applicants to apply every 2 years, which is expensive and also adds to the number of pending applications at USCIS, the administration made that switch to 5 years. And they do believe that this will help improve processing delays. But unfortunately, despite this change, that's not enough to address delays at USCIS. As you might remember from the backlog slide, there is a large backlog of work permit renewal applications. And so for people seeking asylum, it's taking around 15 months for USCIS to process that renewal applications. And what that means for employers and for the applicants is that there's a risk that an applicant who has work authorization might experience a gap in their work authorization if USCIS can't process the renewal application before that initial work permit expires. And when that happens, applicants can lose their jobs. Sometimes employers might have to put someone on unpaid leave until that new work permit arrives. And this is very disruptive, and it has happened before. So in 2021, this happened. Many businesses spoke out because the employees that they had hired and trained were experiencing renewal delays and then were in danger of losing their work authorization. And so what the administration did is that they increased the length of something that's called an automatic work permit extension, which is just like what it sounds. The administration will automatically extend someone's work permit for a certain period of time while their work permit renewal application is pending. And what that does is it allows the applicant to continue to use their expired work permit until they receive a new work permit card. And so even though that work permit is expired on its face, when combined with the receipt notice confirming that an applicant has renewed their work authorization, that work permit is actually still valid for the length of the automatic extension. And so this extension used to be about 6 months or about 180 days. In 2022, due to the backlog renewal crisis, the administration lengthened it to 540 days or about 18 months. But this was only a temporary fix. So last fall, they went back to that shorter 180-day work permit extension, thinking they would have solved the renewal crisis by then. Unfortunately, they haven't. We're still experiencing very long delays for work permit renewal applications. And so on April 8th, the administration again issued a longer work permit extension for 540 days. And the impact of this extension was pretty big. They estimated that 800,000 immigrants were at risk of losing their work authorization if they didn't issue this longer extension. They estimate that it impacted 82,000 employers. and that it saved businesses about 17.4 billion in labor turnover costs. So I mentioned all this to say that the administration issued this rule, and they are accepting comments from the public about this longer work permit extension. And they want to know a couple things. So one, they want to know if this extension should be permanent, since it's been a series of temporary fixes until now. And they want to know if the period should be even longer, because the renewal backlog is so long, and they want to make sure that nobody's in danger of losing their work authorization. And so what we want to do is to encourage everyone here to submit a comment to USCIS about the work permit extension, to explain how a permanent and longer extension would help your business or organization by minimizing disruptions to the labor force, and to prevent people from falling out of the workforce due to renewal delays. And so we have template language that you can adapt to explain why a longer extension is a good thing. And we're happy to circulate that afterwards, and to support anyone who's interested in submitting a comment. So that's it from me. And with that, I'll turn it over to Yael for more solutions and ways to improve this process.
Thanks so much, Christina. And so as you've heard from Amy and Christina, there are different statuses, and each one and different problems with getting work permits or renewing work permits that all require different solutions. So parole, you can apply for work authorization right away, but there's a fee and application process that might be burdensome. For asylum in particular, some of the renewal issues have been and can be helped by the administrative extension that Christina was just talking about. But one of the things that cannot be fixed without Congress is that statutory 100-day waiting period for asylum applicants to be eligible for work permits. And just practically, you have to apply for asylum first for that clock to start, right? That 6-month clock to start. So, what it actually means in practice is that when people newly arrive, they first have to figure out how to apply for asylum, which is not obvious to everybody, and they could need counsel to help them apply for asylum. And only then, after they apply for asylum, can they then start that 150-day wait till they can then apply for a work authorization. And that 100-day period that 100-day waiting period, that's statutory, can really only be changed by Congress. Another thing that Congress really could do to help out is, all of these eligibilities require applications, initial applications, renewal applications. Even if you get an extension on your renewal application, you still have to file one. And USCIS needs more funding to actually process these applications. And as you know, Congress controls the power of the purse. So it's Congress that has to appropriate more money for USCIS. We are in appropriation season right now for fiscal year 2025. And it would help a great deal if you could urge members of Congress to support USCIS in processing applications. Another thing that would really be helpful is for us to get more data about work processing time, so we would understand what the delays are and how to advocate appropriately for the different statuses. We have some information available on initial asylum applications, but we don't actually have it for other categories, and not as much data as would be helpful to have. Another thing, those are things that Congress could require or needs to require, but the administration can do things as well. And I just want to say, as many the reason I'm sort of splitting things up this way, Congress versus what the executive branch can do in the Biden administration, is because we all recognize that there's this workforce challenge and people want to hire more workers, right? But it's not all that helpful to just say, Biden, please issue all these work permits. Like, that's not actually how it works. Certainly the Biden administration cannot change that waiting period, right? That's something only Congress can do. The Biden administration can do some things like make the fee waiver application that is now currently only available online, I'm sorry, only available on paper, available online. So for example, if someone was, an asylum seeker was to apply for a renewal, or if some parolee wanted to apply for a fee waiver for that initial asylum application, that would have to be done separately. And there is usually a lag time, a longer lag time or longer wait time on paper filed applications. And as you know, Christina really emphasized, and the reason why the extension is so important is because of the processing churn, an enormous delay, an enormous workforce disruption that renewal applications pose. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we're seeing in terms of so far, in terms of policies that have been happening over the past couple of months to really improve matters related to work authorization, the issuing of work authorization documents. One of the things that was rolled out a couple of months ago, late last year, was that when a lot of people were coming through the border, especially with CBP-1 appointments, as Amy mentioned, when they got this 2-year parole, USCIS was helping those folks apply, get their biometrics done right soon after they arrived at the border. So that by the time they could quickly kind of get their work applications filed, because as I said, you know, parolees don't have that waiting period. So sort of facilitate quick applications for parolees to get their applications done. And then in New York City and in Chicago, there have been some clinics that have also helped asylum seekers who have already waited out that 150 days or 180 days, you know, to actually file their asylum applications as well. I know New York has a whole a sort of center where that's really helping people who have waited the amount of time to immediately be able to file their work authorization applications. You know, some of the address issues that Christina mentioned, where people are moving, especially new arrivals who may be staying in shelters, and may not have permanent addresses to send the mail to. Some of the local nonprofits have been helping with that by serving as, even if you leave a shelter, they'll allow you to send your mail there, so you can go pick up your documents from there. And that really helps. They've also been helping with fee waiver applications by, if you're staying in a shelter, you're unlikely to be able to afford the fee to apply for work authorization. And so the shelters are actually issuing documents attesting to that fact, and speeding and like making the fee waiver applications a little bit easier to be approved by having that letter of support. But I think, you know, for this group especially, a key thing that you all could do is, you know, write to Congress and the administration about ways to really, but that this is a concern of yours, and identify, you know, the kinds of things that the administration could do to alleviate the work authorization process and problems with the work authorization process, and what Congress can do as well. Next slide. And you know, one major area of focus that would and actually would be really good for Congress to sort of solve some of these problems, especially the things that only Congress can solve, is the law HR 1325, which is the Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act. On the House side of the aisle, it's bipartisan, supported by Congresswoman Pingree from Maine and Congresswoman Salazar from Florida. And one of the main thing that it does is it really shortens that 180-day waiting period to 30 days. It makes the work permit valid for as long as the asylum application is pending. So hopefully we get the extension, and the extension is good so that renewals aren't required for at least 540 days, as Christina mentioned. But this would actually make it so that renewals are never actually required, because the work authorization would be valid until the adjudication of the claim was complete. And that that removing of the requirement to renew applications really does free up USCIS resources to process initial applications and all the other work authorization applications they have in their queue for non-asylum seekers as well. Next slide. And I just wanted to throw out the last idea of sort of why this is a good solution for businesses and employers. It really would allow employers to hire workers already here in the US wanting to work. So, asylum seekers are here. We all know they want to work, they want to support their families, they want to get going. There are no recruitment or requirements as there might be with like a temporary visa program. These workers are here and they're ready to work. We just need to sort of speed up the time that they're eligible to do it. HR 1325, the House version of the bill, allows for more people to be eligible for these work authorization because it's not dependent on whether you enter at a port of entry. It's not dependent on other things. It basically is more than the Senate version. It will give EADs to more people who are already here, present and willing and wanting to get to work. So the eligibility requirements are more capacious and will allow more people to get these EADs. As I already discussed, it eliminates administrative barriers, especially the renewal issue, that issue of employers having to worry about whether or not someone's EAD is going to expire. And as Christina mentioned, somebody having to potentially put somebody on leave until they have another EAD. And sort of it would really eliminate a lot of the turnover costs that exist now. And sort of by allowing asylum seekers to work sooner, it makes it more likely that they'll be able to obtain counsel. One of the most important things that asylum seekers will do with their wages that they receive is provide for their families, get apartments, become consumers in the United States, consumers of goods, but also be able to afford counsel so they can pursue their asylum claims more effectively, which is really, really important. Next slide. So last, this is sort of just what you can do to advocate. We would love to hear from businesses and employers on social media and op-eds about why this is an important issue for you. As we've already mentioned, writing to your members of Congress, sharing your perspective, asking your members of Congress to support the Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act. You are very much welcome to join our campaign. We will make room for you on our logo, our big logos. We have so many logos, but we will absolutely make room for you if you'd like to support and join this campaign, along with Misty and the whole Critical Labor Coalition and some of the other businesses that have already joined, as you'll see on the logo, a bunch of logos that are here. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Yael. And I just want to add to that, as the Critical Labor Coalition, we've gone up on the Hill a number of times talking about the asylum seeker bill. I want to, if you have concerns or questions about it, especially as a business owner, I do want to let you know this issue is very politically sensitive at this point, but it shouldn't be. And so if you go up and you talk to your member and the first thing you say is asylum seeker, and they kind of jump back and say, no, we're dealing with the border or any type of other immigration related issue. It's important to note that this is a workforce issue. If you're a business owner, you need people to help you run your business. And as Yael said, they're already here. So this isn't about the border. This isn't about any other very politicized issue. This is about getting the small business owners connected with those that want to work. As Yael mentioned, these people, the asylum seekers, want to work. One of our members, the Hotel and Lodging Association, has said, we have asylum seekers in our, boarding with us, and we want them to work, and they want to work, but we can't make that happen. So this legislation would greatly benefit small business owners and the American economy. So just going to start with the questions right now, and I'll start with the one dealing with the asylum seekers bill. Where is the bill now, and what are steps to get it passed? Who wants to answer that one?
So the bill is it has been introduced. We have co-sponsors. The steps to get it passed is that it has to get to the floor for a vote. But we're really focusing on getting more bipartisan support. So you may be familiar with how slow Congress moves. So we're trying to really solidify the bipartisan support right now, and then have it be reintroduced in the next Congress, and hopefully be reintroduced as a bipartisan bill and have it. So it's like this is a long-term thing. It is not likely to pass this Congress. It's too close to the election. So it is out there. We are looking for there's co-sponsors. It is a bipartisan bill, but we're definitely trying to solidify the bipartisan side of that.
Right. So I think the ask might be if you were to write your member of Congress, if this is an issue that really matters to you, and we would love for you to do this, a great idea would be to ask that member of Congress to consider being a co-sponsor. And explain why why it's an important issue for you and for your business.
Another good question. Are you working with any type of unions to address this and any other work permit type legislation?
I can answer that. We do have a broad coalition of folks that we work with, including immigrant rights organizations and also unions and other nonprofit organizations on work permit issues and solutions, including legislative and administrative solutions.
I can answer this one. Who are the main sponsors of the bill? In the House, it is Congresswoman Pingree, and in the Senate, it is Susan Collins. Again, both of them are bipartisan bills, and they differ a little bit, as Yael mentioned. And it's in the judiciary committees of both chambers of commerce. So it's important for everybody to write to their members, but if they're on the judiciary committee, it's even more, vital to get a hearing in the committee and a markup on the bill so that it can go to the Senate floor. The next question, do we have a template for that letter to support the asylum seekers bill? And maybe we can send it with the PowerPoint for them to send to their offices?
There'll be an email with resources sent after this call. Well, probably next week, probably not immediately after this call. It is a Friday after all. Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, Misty, just on that point, we can also work with businesses on talking points, op-eds, template letters, if businesses would like to engage further and meet with members on this issue.
Okay. And some people are asking, there were some administrative asks and then there's the congressional ask. What is the difference? And should you do one of them before the other? What is the time frame and the importance of both of that?
I can start and then defer to others. I'd say on the administrative front, the sort of immediate administrative ask about submitting a comment on the work permit extension and the renewal backlog is time sensitive. So there is a deadline to submit comments. It's June 7th, 2024. And so I'd say that's one immediate ask. And some of the other administrative asks are kind of more medium to long-term solutions. But I would say it's kind of a both and approach. to legislation and to administrative advocacy, but opening it up in case others have other thoughts too.
Right. No, and on the congressional ask, like we said before, it's always good to that's less time sensitive, although I think part of what we're trying to do now, even though we recognize that it's possible that the bill won't pass this year, the House version of the Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act, we are trying to get especially more bipartisan support in the House, on the House side. So if you could write to your members, again, not something that you don't have to do it tomorrow, or you can do it in June, or you can do it in July, but it would be a great thing to do, you know, in the next couple of months or a couple of weeks. And again, like we said, we can definitely, we've already done some letters, but we can certainly send around some templates and supportive language about what those kinds of requests to members of Congress can look like. And in terms of raising awareness, I mean, I think one of the reasons we're doing these webinars is to sort of, you know, there's been a lot of attention to this issue because it's such a pressing workforce issue. And one of the things I was trying to convey, and I think all of us were trying to convey, is sort of like, everybody knows this is a problem, right? Like, this is not a surprise to any of you on this webinar, but really focusing on what would actually solve the problem. And the two sort of main solutions that we've really identified is the administrative, this extension that Christina mentioned, that's time sensitive ask, and this passage of this act, this congressional act that would like limit the amount of time people have to wait to apply. Those are really, really big changes that would really solve these problems. So I think in writing op-eds, for example, if that's another kind of action you want to do, you really want to focus on why these are the right answers for this problem. Because I think so again, like I said, everybody knows this is a problem, but I don't think there's as much awareness as there should be about what are the real ways to solve them. And these are two.
All right. Next question. Does this have anything to do with EB3 workers, or is this something different? Amy, do you want to take that one?
It is something different. Very short and sweet answer for that. Yeah, something different, totally different part of immigration.
Okay. And then lastly, how do you get more involved in filing a comment with the administration? Are there templates for that, as well as the letter to Congress? And can you explain that process, the public comment process, a little bit further?
Yes, I'm happy to take that one. So you can submit a comment online. They're open for individuals, organizations, businesses, local governments. And what you do is you submit a comment specifically in response to a proposed rule. And the administration has to take that comment into account when they decide to issue a final rule. And so you can apply, you can submit it online, you can attach a PDF, type in your answer. We do have template language for businesses and organizations, and we can circulate that on the list afterward, as well as the link and location of where to submit the comment online.
All right. That's all the questions we have right now. Any final comments from the panel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, one of the other things, I feel like I'm the person who's saying, you know, trying to clarify some of the like great deal of attention this issue has received, you know, and this relates to the question about the other types of visas that were mentioned, the EB visas. You know, like Misty said, like I said earlier, one of the reasons this is such a pressing issue is also because there's so many new arrivals coming to this country and who are here now wanting to work. And that's what this presentation is mostly focused on. New arrivals, either who received parole, may have gotten TPS, or seeking asylum. Those are the populations we've been emphasizing here, many of whom have come to US cities and who are staying in shelters and become very visible as people who want to work but can't, and want to get out of those shelters and support themselves, right? I think that's another reason this has become such a visible issue. And so one of our major focus is not only that these are folks who really want become self-sufficient, and not rely on living in shelters and public support. And I think there's this convergence of interest right now of those folks and employers who really need workers, as Misty outlined. And these are some of the ways, these very concrete ways to sort of make this happen. And so I just wanted to throw that other piece of clarifying information out there, because I think that's the reason we sort of focused on these particular populations in this presentation.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll bring this to a close and thank everybody for their time. And thanks to all the panelists for all of that information. We will certainly follow up with everybody regarding the templates and information discussed on this webinar. And thank you. Everybody have a great weekend.